Chapter 16. Morning. John Hamman, 31. Cretaceous. Jenny woke before dawn, the air still cold. Reaching up, she touched the tent above her head. It was real. She was here in the past. She thought back to the note and all that it implied, what she had to do. It was still chilly. That was good. This would probably be the safest time of the day. She pushed the sleeping bag off her. She had not zipped it up or taken her boots off. Jenny did retighten them from where she had loosened the laces last night. She untied the front of the tent and slowly pulled the flap back to look outside. You never knew what you might see if you were quiet. It was still dark, but she didn't hear anything. She climbed out and began to break the camp down. The sky was finally lightening when Jenny had everything packed away. The batteries were sealed in plastic in a pouch on her belt. The rifle was strapped to the side of the pack. Releasing 2 Fastex buckles would free it. The Neosted was on a single-point sling around her shoulder. She could shoulder it on either side or let it hang, where it would point to her lower left. She had birdshot in the chamber and number 4 in one side and double-aught buckshot in the other. Jenny took her first real look around as the sky grew light and the sun began to crack over the horizon. She looked at the compass. Sure enough, it said that the sun rose in the west. That meant the needle was actually pointing to the south. She knew this was entirely possible from geologic data, but it was different to see it in person. It was reassuring. If it had not been reversed, she would know that she was in the wrong time, perhaps by millennia. The sun was rising above a line of hills in the distance. From the distance, she judged them to be fairly large. She thought she could see the land rising to meet them. Could there be a river running at their base? She couldn't see any sign of one. If the river was bordered by hills, she thought he would have mentioned that. Instead, he spoke of meandering horseshoe bends. That sounded like an open plain. Looking to the east, the plains rolled away as far as she could see. That looked more promising, but it also meant she was on the wrong side of the river. That could be a problem. It was possible the river was on the far side of those hills, but again, that would still put it close enough that she was sure he would have used them as a landmark. Or she could be much farther from him than he had estimated. Best to follow the watershed downhill, away from the range of hills, to her west. She put her back to the sun and started out away from the hills. As she did, she detoured by the Benedictine that she had appeared beside. She reached out and stripped a handful of the seeds from the plant. If she lived through this, no one would ever believe what was growing in her garden. Walking with her back to the sun gave her good light to see anything she was approaching. She carried the shotgun at low ready, though she had not seen any of the fauna yet. The land was open enough that she made good time. As she walked, she chewed on a protein bar, not wanting to waste the morning hours cooking something more substantial. It was chewy, requiring an effort to masticate. The flavor left a lot to be desired and was hardly worth it, but she knew she could march all day on a couple of them. As much as she yearned to explore this world, she was more than aware of the hazards that might lurk here. The sooner she found her grandfather, the better. They should leave this place as soon as possible. As she walked along, she catalogued the flora around her. The idea of the seeds stuck with her, and as she walked, she would do the same with other extinct plants as she passed by them. Of course, not all produced seeds or were bearing at this time, and she could not stop to dig anything up. Not here, but perhaps if she found her grandfather, she might be able to pick up a larger souvenir. It was still early when she saw it, curled up in a ball under a fern. She wasn't sure what it was. It was covered with feathers like a bird, but she could see a long neck turned and tucked under its arm that was feathered with long feathers, almost like a wing. It was her first dinosaur, and it was lunch. She thought about the sacrilege of what she was about to do as she raised the shotgun. She was about to kill an animal that had been extinct for millions of years. She wished she had ears. The roar was loud. The barrel was not overly short, but the bullpup configuration put the muzzle too close to her ear. She wished for her Remington. The blast blew the thing over, and with one spasm, it went still. She walked over to examine her kill. It was small, a bit larger than a chicken. It had long feathers on the back of its arms and larger feathers on the end of its tail. The rest was covered with more of a down, clearly for insulation. With its smaller size, it probably had issues with body heat during the night. The head was not overly large. The mouth was more beak-like, reinforcing its bird-like appearance. She knew what this was. Collections were full of examples. It was a Caudipteryx, or something closely related to it. She wondered what would be in its stomach. The thinking was that it ate mostly plants and seeds, but was opportunistically omnivorous, preying on insects and small animals, maybe on some of the small mammals living in this time. For that matter, what time was she in? Jenny was fairly sure that she was in the Cretaceous, probably the early to middle. Turning back to the dinosaur. It caused her pain, but she cut the head off and held it upside down to drain. One thing she could say was that the heart was persistent, and she thought she got most of the blood out. She set about plucking it. Again, this felt like a crime against science, but she would think more about specimens and less about lunch later when she wasn't trapped here. She thought about plucking it while she walked, but didn't want to leave a trail of fresh feathers behind her. So she sat on her pack as she worked and thought about the ridiculous situation she was in. Once the animal was plucked and gutted, she could see it much clearer. It was a Caudipteryx, or a close cousin. She really wanted to dissect it too, see the full skeleton. What an opportunity! But she buried the evidence with a small trowel from her pack, wrapped the thing in a bag, and put it inside the pack for later. She would bury all the evidence she could of her passage. She didn't want a larger predator to pick up her trail. The sun was up now as Jenny continued on her way. The plain was flat and dry. Wind blew dust around her feet. The ground cover was sparse, consisting mostly of various types of ferns. Grasses had not really developed in this time period, and the soil was not as stabilized. Erosion must be much faster here. As the afternoon progressed, she started to spot some flyers. At first, only a handful, circling high on thermals as the day grew hotter. They were far enough away that she could not identify them. Their behavior implied that they filled a place in the ecosystem like the vulture. They were probably searching for carrion. She was debating what to do about food. She didn't want to cook anything at a fixed camp, so in the early afternoon, she stopped and decided to cook her kill. Best to eat it now when there was no sign of larger predators, and the land was open enough that she could see anything coming. The prospect of something being attracted to her tent in the night was unappealing. She decided she would only make cold camps. She wasn't sure if a fire was a good idea or not. Most animals were naturally afraid of fire, but it would also announce her presence. Another thought occurred to her. A nocturnal predator might do well to hunt with infrared vision. In the cold night, larger prey would hold enough thermal mass to make them stand out against the cold ground. Snakes hunted warm-blooded rodents that way. The point being that a fire would be even more of a beacon in the night. It was a moot point right now with little to burn, but a fire at night might be a mixed blessing. She had a small stove with 3 bottles of propane. It should be more than enough as long as she used it sparingly. Water might prove more of an issue. She stripped the meat off the bones of the small dinosaur and put it into the pot to cook for stew. A packet of chicken noodles filled it out nicely. In the end, it did taste very much like chicken, and she didn't think that was because of the noodles. This family was the direct ancestors of birds. As she ate, she couldn't help but play with the bones, so strange to handle what she had previously only chipped from stone. It was a big meal. She forced herself to finish it and buried the remains. Washing her hands in the dirt, she shouldered her pack and marched onward.